Honourable Senators, I wish to draw your attention to the presence in the gallery of Senator Omidvar, Senator Omidvar's husband, their daughter Ramona Omidvar Kular, Naila Omidvar Kular, their granddaughter and Flight Corporal Air Cadet League of Canada, and Zayan Omidvar Kular, their grandson. They are accompanied by Dan Miller, Senator Omidvar's son-in-law, and Deepa Mehta, award-winning director and screenwriter. And on behalf of all senators, I welcome you to the Senate of Canada. Senator Omidvar.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Thank you, Senator Cormier. He's one step ahead of me. Thank you so much for those kind words that everyone has said to me. I'm feeling slightly out of body experience right now because the faces in front of me have changed. The seating plan has changed, and I'm completely discombobulated. But your kind words and your kind comments about my time in the Senate are very well received, and I will not forget them. And I want to share very briefly, it's not going to be a long speech, but I want to share with you some of my thoughts about this place, this country, about the Senate. And I want to start off with the conflicting emotions in my head and heart. And I think you will all empathize with those. And these are relief on the one hand and regret on the other. But there is absolutely no conflict about the sincerity of my gratitude and appreciation for all those who keep this place working. I want to start with the people who protect us, the parliamentary protective services. I never understood what their role was the first week that I came, but then I began to appreciate that they keep us safe, and so very safe. And I want to pay a special tribute to the people in the background in ISD. It doesn't stand for intelligence services, it stands for technical services. And they have been such support to a senator who has aged out, I think, of technological innovation. And I'm a complete Luddite. And they have been at, and I call them at 8 o'clock in the morning and they're there. And I call them at 4:30 in the evening, they're there. I'm not quite sure what I will do with them, but I do know I owe you a huge debt of gratitude. And the bus drivers, especially who were so welcome on cold and windy days in this very cold and windy city. I have tried to imagine what it must take and who it must take to have the Senate Hansard ready the next day for reading, even after we sit beyond midnight. I'm not quite sure how it all comes together, but it does. To the clerk of the Senate, the Copo table, the interpreters, the technicians, I see you all, and thank you from the bottom of my heart. To the Black Rod for his service to us, and a special word to our wonderful young pages who are seated at the edge of the room. They have looked out for me in a very special way because they realize that at the committee meetings, I need to be kept supplied with endless cups of mint tea. And they do that with such care, and I'm really grateful to them. And of course, there's a small army, or a large army, I'm not quite sure, of Senate admin who do the comms, the finance, the HR. I'm not quite sure how it works. I chose not to get into the internal governance of the chamber, but I'm so grateful it is there, and it allows us to be the best we can be. So many have remarked that it takes that it is a village here. It takes a village to keep this place functioning. I think Senator Lankin, on departing, made the same comment. And I will simply add to this by remarking that all the villagers here have a huge commitment to this essential institution. And of course, to our chief village, head of our village, Speaker Gagné. Thank you so much for your service. As some of you have heard me say, I am an accidental Canadian, and I am an accidental senator. I did not aspire to be either, but a confluence of accidents, some good, some bad, have led me here. As people have remarked, and as you may well know, I was born in India. I met my partner in Germany at university. We went up on a hike in the Bavarian mountains, not knowing each other very well. We came down the mountains and said we would hike together for the rest of our lives. And we did. We are still not quite hiking. Not quite hiking, but we celebrated 50 years together, and that's why this is, in addition, a very special year for us. We had no desire and no need to come to Canada until my family needed sanctuary. I'm eternally grateful to this country for taking a chance on us and providing us with safety, security, and opportunity. And I sometimes think about my life, and I ask my daughter Ramona to sometimes think about our life. What would it have been like if we'd had to stay in Iran? But I must confess that when I came in 1981, I was very superficially aware of Canada. My perceptions of this country were colored very much by a grade 5 geography unit in school in India. It was all rather romantic. Logging camps, lumberjacks, beavers, bears, and the RCMP. Maybe that's what I had in mind. The reality when we hit the ground in Toronto was, of course, very different. And I think Mehran and I experienced every hard knock in the school of hard knocks. We learned early on that we had to be twice as good to be recognized as half as much, and yet we survived. I made 2 decisions very early on, decisions which have been central to my journey and which have, I think, led me here. I was advised then, almost in the first week of arrival, that because I had no Canadian work experience and because I had a difficult first name and last name, I would never get a job, at least not in the short term. And I was told that I could ease my path by changing my name. And to be honest, I did throw a few names around in my head. Rosa, yes, Runa, and Rita. We practiced them for 2 days. But in the end, I could not do it. We could not do it. I could no more change my name than I could change the color of my skin, and so I wear them both proudly. But there is something I did decide to change. I am a teacher, like Senator Cordy and Senator Martin, but specifically a teacher of German as a second language. I know that's odd, and how I got to German is a story over a drink in a bar. But I did realize very quickly that no one in Canada would want to learn German from an Indian who had just arrived as a refugee from Iran. I'm a pragmatist, after all, and instead I decided to grab Canadian life with 2 hands and proceeded to reinvent myself. It is these 2 decisions, one to remain authentic and the other to reinvent myself, that I believe had led me to this place. In my 40-plus years in this country, I have been both an insider and an outsider. I believe that the lens I use to look at our country offer up a useful and very positive comparison to the other 2 countries that I know the best, India and Iran. Above everything else, I see that we are a country still in the process of building our nation. So we are a country of aspiration, but also a country of reflection and correction. We are not perfect, and we will never be. But we do have the courage to look at ourselves in the mirror and be honest at the reflection that stares back at us. It is not a pretty picture. In fact, it can be rather ugly, and yet we do have the fortitude to look back at it, warts and all. Notwithstanding our best efforts, we are often not able to get things completely right. But here's the difference. We try. We try. That is an admirable trait, given the many wrongs in our past. The colonization of our indigenous peoples, the legal discrimination against the Japanese and Chinese, the institutionalized racism against the black people of Canada. This is part of our history. I could go on and on. But few other nations are as open to pathways of finding truth, justice, and reconciliation as we are. And for that reason, colleagues, I am most proud to be a Canadian. Adding to this, I don't believe we have a fixed sense of our identity. It is a constantly evolving one, and given the nature of our demographics, will continue to evolve and change. I admire that we are not rigid about these matters, that we are willing to allow this identity to be shaped by the people of this country, and as they shift and change, so do we, so does our collective identity. We are, and I believe, should always remain a work in progress, not perfect, but in search of perfection. This combination, I think, of being self-reflective on the one hand and self-corrective on the other, combined with our ability to shift and change with the aspirations of Canada, I believe this sets Canada apart from so many other places, especially as polarization threatens many parts of the world and seeps into our narrative too. I have learned a great deal about how this country works in this chamber and why it sometimes does not. We are always arguing amongst ourselves, amongst all our constituent parts. That appears to be the nature of our federation. As the discourse globally and even nationally continues to disintegrate into incivility and outright coarseness, the Senate has an obligation to be the hallmark for democracy and demonstrate that we can disagree with each other, at times loudly and vociferously, but always with civility. This place, too, has evolved, as Canada has. It is now more independent and less tied to the partisan politics of the House of Commons. It makes sense to me that we are better able to serve Canadians without being a mirror of the other place. But with greater independence, I think we also know comes greater responsibility. In exercising this responsibility, Senator Shugart cautioned us to exercise restraint, to stay in our lane as the House of Sober Second Thought, and not to extend our independence by becoming free agents relying only on our personal opinions. We are, after all, the unelected people, he reminded us. So yes, we must exercise restraint, but restraint does not equate with faint-heartedness. It does not equate with passivity. It is for those, in fact, who have courage. It requires courage to stay within our boundaries, no matter how much we may believe otherwise. But it also requires courage for another reason, because we are the last legislative port of call for the protection of minority rights. This chamber is the voice for those who are voiceless. Courage will be called on to defend their rights, regardless of who may come into power next year or this year. I am lost in all the rumors in this place. My colleagues here have fought hard to protect those rights, and sometimes they have succeeded, and sometimes they have failed. But every time they have stood up to do so, they have demonstrated courage as individual senators. The time may come for us, for this place, for collective courage. Senator Harder's motion to reject the study of bills that invoke the notwithstanding clause may well be that moment for collective courage. Civility, constraint, restraint, and courage. I hope, colleagues, that you will continue to add to this lexicon of words. I still remember my first impressions of this place in 2016 when I was inducted. This is a storied place, a place steeped in history and tradition. It is also a place that reflects the colonial roots of our country and our ties to the Westminster model. Whilst we have improved on that model a great deal to suit our Canadian reality, it is still grounded in the past. I, for one, wish for Canada to shake off its colonial roots at some point and stride with confidence into the future on its own terms. If that is to come, colleagues, you will here in this chamber play an essential role in this transformation. In this chamber, I have met senators who come from very different lives and realities, political ideologies. But I know from experience that in all our diversities, we find the way to commonalities. I believe if we can walk together, talk together, drink together. Some of you may remember the malt whiskey nights we used to have. I think then we are better able to work together. And I thank everyone in this chamber who has worked with me on issues related to Iran, Ukraine, Rohingya, Afghanistan, and others. The encroachment of human rights, and I pay a special nod to my colleagues who have worked with me on human rights issues, because the encroachment of human rights in other parts of the world, or even in our country, it is a slippery slope. If we tolerate it elsewhere, then we run the risk of normalizing it everywhere. I want to say a few words about my home team, the ISG. The ISG has been the keeper of the flame for an independent Senate. The independence of the Senate is more secure today because of your leadership. It does a remarkable job because look at the size of us. We are so big, and yet our leadership does a remarkable job of keeping us under one big tent, even though we may have very different views on different matters. Our leadership, I would say, it's strategic, it is persistent, it is inclusive. And most of all, these three wonderful women complete their work with great grace and elegance, and I thank you for that very much. As to my legacy, I don't think it's up to me to determine or to tell you what it is. It is up to you. But the issues I have worked on, charities, Afghanistan, refugees, immigration, Ukraine, all of these issues have been the inspiration of leaders from civil society. Some of them are in the gallery. I cannot thank you all enough for enabling me to be your parliamentary and legislative voice. I have carried your ideas in this chamber, hopefully with some success. And I thank you very much for allowing me to do so. I have been privileged to chair one of the best committees in the Senate Social Affairs, Science and Technology Committee. We are frankly challenged by the scope of our issues, and I regret that science and technology, important as they are, always get short shrift in our work. And I really hope the Chamber pays attention to the proposal of reforms coming to modernize the Senate committee mandates so that they are more in keeping with the times. But in this time that I have chaired it, I have been blessed with an extraordinary committee members who are committed and passionate and engaged about their issue, my fantastic steering committee who are here today. And we work really well, and we were just thinking, maybe we work really well together because we are all women. I think that may make a difference. And of course, we have a fantastic and extremely capable clerk, Emily Barrett, who helps us, and of course, our very gifted Library of Parliament analysts. So finally, I want to get to the difficult part of my speech about relief and regret. I am sure you will empathize with why I feel relief. I will no longer need to schlep my very sorry bones from Toronto to Ottawa twice a week, depending on the vagaries of our weather, Canada, and whatever may transpire in the House of Commons. I will not miss the freezing temperatures in this chamber, nor the absence of a healthy, nutritious meal at least once a day. But most of all, I will no longer leave a piece of my heart every week with my family in Toronto to only come back on Friday to them and run twice as hard to make it up to them again. We all know that even as we may earn some small measure of credit and even perhaps a bit of glory in our time, it is our families that pay the greatest price. I am so looking forward to being a full-time partner, mother, and grandmother to my family, to Meran, my golden partner, as we celebrated 50 years together. You have been the wind behind my sails. Everything I do here has only been possible because you have held the fort at home. To my daughters, Ramona and Yasmin, and my 6 grandchildren, 2 of whom are here today, and my wonderful son-in-law, Daniel Miller, they should all know their Nani is back. As for regrets, there will be many. Regret that I will no longer be a member of this chamber, of this community of friends and colleagues. I will only be able to watch from afar as you study new laws. I will miss the opportunity of leaving my fingerprints on the legislative narrative of this country, which has been the greatest privilege of my life. I believe I will miss the return to the old House of Commons and the old Senate block, but I think many of you may well miss that too. But most of all, I will miss the people, and especially the 2 people who have been constantly by my side. I think we all know we're only as good as our teams. I have benefited enormously from the expertise and commitment of my team, and they have stood by me on discouraging days, on days when I was willing to give up. They have encouraged me, sometimes pushed me to go the extra mile. Whatever success I have had in this place is due a great deal to Paul Fassett and Stephanie Saunders. And I wish to say the following words to them directly. Paul, you have been my Director of Parliamentary Affairs for roughly 7 years. You shaped my political understanding and helped me understand political opportunity. You were my guide to the intricacies of legislations and legalisms, and during all the chaos generated by an emotional and often chaotic senator, you were always the steady and sober hand. We have been well matched, I think. You are the ice to my fire, and together we have achieved outcomes that seemed unattainable at the start. And now finally, to the person I will miss the most. And we have promised each other today that we will not cry. Stephanie Saunders, Stephanie, has worked with me for 25 years. You will remember that you came to work for me when you were fresh out of grad school 25 years ago, and your career has closely matched mine. You are my right hand and my left hand. You are trustworthy, loyal, you're not afraid to speak truth to power. I think of you as the little sister I never had. We will, of course, stay in touch, but I will miss your daily presence, even though sometimes it has been a nagging presence. Yes, like the phone call I got today at 7 o'clock. Paul and Stephanie will transition to working as a team for Senator McBean. I don't even know where she is. Senator McBean, you get the A team. The wind is behind your sails. As for me and 75, I believe it's just another number. Whilst I retire from the Senate and return to life as a private citizen, I will always remain an engaged one. Our country will continue to hear from me one way or another. So thank you, colleagues, for all your kind words, for the collegiality you have shown me. Let's always remember that this place is an essential place, and you do essential work. I wish you all the best for the future, and I hope every now and then you will remember me with the same degree of fondness that I will remember you. And happy Diwali. Thank you.